Hey Pokemon Masters, Berkey Toby here, and did you know that the Diamond and Pearl clan of the Hisui region in Pokemon Legends Arceus are not actually originally from the Hisui region? Instead, they originated in the Hoenn region. And this is because their origins tie back to Archie and Maxie of Team Aqua and Magma, as well as the Draconids, an ancient group of travelers whose presence can be seen all over the Pokemon world. Now I know what you're thinking, you're about to comment already. Toby, not everyone can be a time traveler. Okay, the player character, they're a time traveler. Volo is maybe a time traveler. The picture in the Diamond and Pearl clan tents of Alder, it's possibly Alder as a time traveler, but the other pictures in their tents of Archie and Maxie, they can't all be time travelers. Or can they?
Hey Toby, are we doing more time travel theories today?
Oh, hey Hybrid Hero. Yeah, I was just talking about the theory that you did in your channel a while ago about how Alder is totally a time traveler and that the picture in the Diamond and Pearl clan tent, that is of Alder in the past as a time traveler.
Have you told them about how I was the one that convinced you that these paintings actually look like Archie and Maxie?
Yeah, I'm getting to it, but you know, sometimes there's a roundabout way of telling stories. You should know.
Right, like how so much of Hisui's history is told in the old verses scattered across the land. We can deep dive into that over on my channel, but the combination of these verses with the words of Miss Kogita, who knows them, suggests that the people arrived in Hisui in 3 separate waves. First came the old Sinnoh people, who arrived in Sinjo a millennia or 2 ago. These people settled and created the Celestica ruins, the Temple of Sinnoh and the Ancient Retreat. Then within the lifetime of those people, but after the events of the hero, there were a second group who came and created the Diamond and Pearl clans with the misunderstanding on the history of Arceus. And finally came the Galaxy Expedition team, just 100 to 300 years before the main story of Pokemon.
Okay, so let's start by looking at the Pokemon world a millennia or 2 ago. What do we know from the context of all the other Pokemon games? What was happening around then? And maybe we can find out some clues towards who these explorers who arrived in Hisui actually were. And sure enough, there are 3 important events that happen around that time. 1700 to 1900 years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, the Abyssal Ruins were built. They were made as a castle in the Unova region. Speaking of building, event number 2, Conkeldurr, according to his Pokedex entries, taught humans how to build using centrifugal force. Interesting to know that Conkeldurr is one of Alder's Pokemon. Maybe Alder took it back in time with him to help people build stuff. But neither of these 2 events are really of interest to us in determining who these travelers who arrived in Hisui actually were. The 3rd event is far more interesting. For every 1,000 years and 2,000 years ago, meteorites struck the Pokemon world. Specifically, meteorite showers love to land upon the Hoenn region, but meteorites strike the Pokemon world every 1,000 years anyway. The Lental region in New Pokemon Snap suffered that, and I actually did a theory all about that, but focusing on Hoenn here, 2,000 years ago, meteorites rained down and destroyed the original home of the Draconids and created the area we now know in modern-day Hoenn as Meteor Falls. As well as that, the energy within these meteorites awakened the Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre, and they clashed. And then, wishing to the meteorite, the Draconids were able to bring forth Rayquaza and quell the fighting between Groudon and Kyogre. So we've got some ties already to Ruby and Sapphire, Groudon, Kyogre, Archie and Maxie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2,000 years ago, the home of the Draconids, these people, these law keepers of the Hoenn region, it was destroyed. So where did they go?
Ruin Maniac and Toby have already done videos on this, but the people of the Seafolk village in Alola are thought to have a deep connection to the Draconids, and so too are the ancestors of Pacifilog Town, who using their Braille writing, locked away powerful titans of the time in ruins across Hoenn, Unova, and of course, Hisui, where we find the main temple to Regigigas. The fact though that the Snow Point Temple predates the Diamond and Pearl clan suggests that whoever built that temple were the original Celestica people, and the Draconids are those individuals. This is something that's been theorized for years, with the original Regigigas of Hoenn being locked away behind moves that were originally naturally learnable by the Dragon Tamers of Hoenn, with Flygon, Salamence, and Rayquaza all having access to moves that access the Regi Chambers. But does this all line up with the old verses? Toby, I told you already that in Old Verse 12, we learned that the people of Old Hisui came from Sinjo, which is located north of Johto, not Hoenn. Then what's any of this got to do with Archie and Maxie?
I'm getting to it because we know that the Draconids of Hoenn actually visited the Johto region. Their presence can be felt there. In the post-game of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you can, with the red or blue orb, access the Embedded Tower, a sort of reverse of the Sky Pillar buried into the earth where you can locate Groudon, Kyogre, or Rayquaza locked away if you get the Jade Orb once you've got both of the others. The architecture in there is pretty similar to that of the Sky Pillar, so it seems that it's the same people who built it, the Draconids. But on top of that, the Draconids are dragon law keepers, and in the north of Johto, we have Blackthorn City and the Dragon Clan, who we know have a connection to the Draconids because in the manga, their leader has a Rayquaza on his hat, helmet, headgear thing. Also, how many dragon clans are there in the world of Pokemon? It would make sense if these groups are related. And what's just north of Blackthorn City? The event area, the Sinnoh ruins, and of course we know that the people who first visited Hisui, they came from Sinnoh, or rather came via Sinnoh, as these were nomadic travelers who had settled in all of the regions from Hoenn to Alola in the Seafolk village to Johto with the dragon clan that we find there, and then northward into Sinnoh before eventually arriving in Hisui. And remember who these people are, the Draconids, because they're not just the Dragon Tamer Pokemon class. They use Dragon Pokemon, but they're mostly interested in the lore, in the history of the Pokemon world. They sound a lot like Cynthia's family in the Sinnoh region. They sound a lot like the Dragon Clan of Johto. And they sound like exactly the kind of people who would arrive in Sinnoh and perhaps in some ruins there, or perhaps discover something there that would lead them to keep on heading north in search of something that they call the Almighty Sinnoh. This was when they first discovered Arceus. And actually, it seems really likely that once a travel route was established between the Johto and Sinnoh region, it was used quite frequently, and this is why we have matching ruins and architecture from later points in time. 1100 to 1300 years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, similar groups of people, were building ruins and relics to the unknown. We find the ruins of Alph in the Johto region, the Solaceon ruins in the Sinnoh region, and we also find the Tanboy ruins in the Kanto region, this in the Sevi Islands, where the unknown, being a form of writing, can be found right next to the Draconid's main form of writing, Braille. This kind of implies that there was a transition from one form of writing to the other, from the Braille to the unknown, and this transition was happening all as part of this big, same worldwide, world-traveling culture. The Draconids, who among other regions were constantly popping between Johto and the region that we now know as Sinnoh.
Okay, but Toby, I still don't understand. Where do Archie and Maxie fit into all of this?
Okay, Hybrid, well tell me, what do you think happened to this second group of people that visited the Hisui region? What do the old verses say?
Well, according to the old verse, within the lifetime of whoever wrote them, and after the events of the Hero of Celestica, Alder's people left Hisui, which makes sense if they are nomadic travelers like the Draconids. And then a new group of people showed up calling themselves to be Celestica, and they squabbled, likely because the Giratina statue was destroyed, and there was a suppression of knowledge. They factioned into the Diamond and Pearl clans. I guess while they worshipped the story of the original hero, they had images of the founders of those clans in their tents. Archie and Maxie's ancestors, right?
Look closer.
Those, on their outfits, are those Pokeballs? Those are Pokeballs then, like Alder. That would mean that this is Archie and Maxie back in time, because Pokeballs should have existed when the Diamond and Pearl clan started, which would have been less than the 1700 to 1900 year age date of the original Celestica people. So what gives?
This has to be Archie and Maxie from the future for the same reason that you gave for how it can be older, because they're wearing Pokeballs on their outfits, and Pokeballs do not exist in the past of Hisui. So what gives? I'll tell you what gives. Remember, I said those meteorites strike the Pokemon world in cycles every 1,000 years, so 900 to 700 years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, those meteorites were coming around again. We know for a fact they struck the Hoenn region and created the town of Sutopolis as a result, created the Cave of Origin, and it's interesting to note here, Spear Pillar, Sky Pillar, Cave of Origin, Hall of Origin. It's a lot of connection between these Hoenn locations and Sinnoh locations, but anyway, Sutopolis and the Cave of Origins were created. Groudon and Kyogre reawakened and reclashed once again, and the Draconid people, somehow just knowing what to do, were able to appeal to Rayquaza. Rayquaza once again put the children to sleep, and then they left a prophecy for the future and said, in 1,000 years, another meteorite will come round, which sure enough, in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it does. It's threatening the world once again. And how do they have this knowledge of the future? Well, maybe it's because they were being led at that time. 900 to 700 years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, they were being led by Archie and Maxie, who would come from the future. And how had Archie and Maxie ended up going back in time? Well, previously, before this point, they were the leaders of Team Rainbow Rocket, alongside, of course, Giovanni, who was the main leader who had plucked them from their timelines to help him in his conquest across the Alola region. Team Rainbow Rocket was comprised of leaders from all of the villainous teams, Aqua, Magma, but also Plasma and Galactic and Flare. All of these leaders brought together not just from across space, but also from across time, plucked from the points in their timeline where they would have been successful in their plan, Archie and Maxie included. And it's interesting to note that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is happening in a timeline where Mega Evolution exists, but the Archie and Maxie that appear are appearing from a timeline where Mega Evolution doesn't exist, which means not only is Giovanni pulling them from across space and time, but also from across dimensions, from different parts of the multiverse of madness featuring Giovanni. There's a sort of side theory as well here that they say that Giovanni in Pokemon Masters is possibly the Giovanni who's going to start or who did start Team Rainbow Rocket, because Pokemon Masters features Pokemon characters from all across the Pokemon universes in the same canon. And yet, for all of their different versions, iterations, and outfits, the original Archie and Maxie aren't there. Where are they? They, at the end of the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon Rainbow Rocket episode, get sent back to the Hoenn region, but 1,000 years too early, to the time when these meteorites are striking and cause the creation of Sootopolis. They take charge, knowing what destruction Groudon and Kyogre can bring, and helping the Draconid people of that time, stopping them in their fight with Rayquaza. They have that knowledge, and with that knowledge, they help the Draconids prophesy that in 1,000 years, meteorites will come back again, and then they lead the Draconids. They throw aside their evil ways, knowing the destruction that would bring to themselves, having seen their failure as part of Team Rainbow Rocket. They take the Draconids to the Johto region, where they create the embedded tower, and perhaps leave their Groudon and Kyogre that they had brought with them from the future. So there's a whole bunch of time loop duplicates happening here. And then they headed north via the Dragon's Den, up through Old Sinjoh on to Hisui. But once they got there, they didn't have the full picture of everything going on. They didn't know about Giratina, they didn't really know that much about Arceus. All they had to work with were two statues, Dialga and Palkia, and the words of the old Celestica people, and Archie and Maxie did what Archie and Maxie do. They factioned off into two absolutely identical groups, Aqua Magma, Diamond Clan, Pearl Clan, and they became separate leaders to those clans in the past. And just like that, the Diamond and Pearl Clan were born.
Wow, all that from a couple of pictures and the old verses. The verses are fascinating, but despite all this information, we don't actually know who wrote the old verses. But we do have a few ideas, which is what we're going to be going over on my channel. So be sure to check that out.
And of course, with all that being said, so hi Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master!
A huge thank you as always to those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, including the big patrons of this month, Jedruben, Michael Hornschuch, and Lucas Gates. Thank you guys.